Hey, welcome back. Simon Lees here again. I've got a pro guitar tip for you. This week I'm going to talk about, it's more of a beginner's thing really, but again, if you're searching for inspiration of things to do, this is something you could try. When I started playing back in 1982, there weren't any guitar teachers that I could go to, so I borrowed a book from a friend. The book had some really basic chords in, just open chords, and some strumming exercises in there, so I could sort of get both hands working up to a point. Went through that, and it was kind of like, well, what do I do next, I didn't know any other chords apart from the standard open chords, and there was nothing about bar chords in this book, it was like a really basic book. So just out of sheer boredom, I guess, I started mucking about with the chords, and this is what I'm going to suggest you maybe try, if you haven't done it already. If you take any standard open chord and just see what happens when you change one of the notes. Now you can either move one of the notes to a different fret. So say if I'm going to try changing the note on the G string. So at the moment, it's a 2nd fret on the G string. So I'm going to just move that up a fret, see what that sounds like. It's not brilliant, but what happens if I move it up again, Kind of sounds a bit like something, So, all I'm doing there is just using my little finger to change the note that you can hear, on the G string. So I'm changing it from, because obviously it's going to be difficult to move my first finger up there. So if I use my little finger instead, that'll kind of work, So that's something you can try. Or just sometimes when you take your finger off a string, and obviously, I'm putting a rhythm to that. I'm strumming the strings to try and sort of give it, a bit of a beat. That's up to you. That's something you can sort of add to whatever feels natural, whatever feels comfortable. My top tip for strumming is just keep your hand moving at a constant speed. Try not to let it stop and start. But yeah, once you've got yourself a bit of a rhythm, just muck around with the chords. D is one of those chords that sort of, I don't know, it always sounds good. So yeah, okay, so you can take your 2nd finger off. That's another thing that actually sounds quite good when you take it off. If I sort of take my first finger off and then keep doing that alternating thing on the thin E string, it sounds like a different chord, I haven't moved my 3rd finger yet. We'll try that. Ooh, that wasn't so good. And this is what you'll find, Experiment though. Try things out. You don't know what they're going to sound like until you play them. You're going to find good things and bad things, but don't be afraid to play something that sounds bad. If you're not in a performing situation, if you're just on your own, nobody's going to hear it, So yeah, just sort of muck around and just try and find things that sound good. Another thing you can do with that chord, you can move the whole chord shape. Now, there's a song by a band called Extreme, which features one of my favourite guitar players, Nuno Betancourt, and it's called Wholehearted. It's from the Pornography album, and he takes the D chord and he just moves it around, and it's sort of this. And then he sort of moves it a bit further. This is something, you can take that even further, just try and find places you can move the D chord to that sound nice, and there are quite a few. So that's 3 of them there. If I move it up another 2 frets, another 2 frets, another 1 fret maybe, another 2 frets, so you get it right at the top end of the neck. And then if I move it to there, we're exactly 12 frets away from where we started, so you're actually going to be playing the same notes, but just a higher version of those notes, so. Now, obviously, there are places, again, you'll find places you can play the D chord which don't sound so good, Oh, You know, that's a little bit less scary, but that's yeah. So, you know, you're going to get good bits and bad bits, but it's something you can try. Now, it's not just the D chord you can muck around with. I mean, the E chord's another great chord to move around, you know. But I mean, before we do that, if you try... You know, that's the sort of thing, if you can take both of those fingers off, I'd say maybe keep your first finger on. It doesn't sound great if you take your first finger on and off. Because what you're doing, you're changing it from a minor chord to a major chord, and you can't have E major and E minor in the same song, really. It doesn't really fit. Okay, the Beatles did it, but they're clever. You know, so yeah, you know, normally you wouldn't sort of put those two chords together. So the other two fingers are the ones which I would muck about with, you know. You know, a bit of palm muting seems to work well on that. And then you do exactly the same thing on an A chord. I'm not going to play A like that. I'm just going to use two fingers. And that's something else, you know, you haven't always got to play chords like the A chord, which is always a bit of a squash, you know, to get your three fingers in the correct way. So a lot of the time, I don't bother with my third finger on that. I just kind of stick to two fingers, and you can use those two, or even those two, you know. You know, so you get the idea. You can sort of, you can give a bit of life to the chords. You know, chords that you know. So now you've learnt the chords. Just muck about. You haven't always got to learn set songs that people know. You know, you can make stuff up. You know, just invent stuff. And this is what I used to do. Now with the E chord, when you move it around, there's a song called Devil's Stomp by Badlands, which is a band that Jake E. Lee used to be the guitarist, more famous for playing with Ozzy during the mid-80s. And it went like this. It was like a sort of acoustic intro. You know, that sort of thing. So that's moving the E chord to, like, you know, four different places. As with the D chord, you haven't just got to stop there, you know. You know, it's easy. You haven't really got to think about it. All you got to do is just listen to. Try and avoid the ones that sound bad. So if you play one that sounds bad, so like, whoa, just don't play that one. You know, play. But what you find is when you do find a bad sounding one, you've only got to move up a fret or down a fret to find one that sounds kind of nice. You know, so it's not like you go whoa and just put the guitar down and run away. You know, you don't have to do that. Just try something else. You know, but this is what I want you to get from this video, is that from just a little bit of information like I had when I was learning, you know, I managed to find new things to do with it, you know, and just, you know, even with the C chord, you know, so I mean that chord's pretty bland, but when you muck around with it, you know, so you can add notes to it, take fingers off. It doesn't sound so good in a way. When you take your third finger off, it becomes a completely different chord. It sounds nice, but it's not a C chord anymore. But yeah, okay, go for it, you know. Can even add a note to the B string and. It's a bit tricky to get that right, but yeah, you get the idea, you know. All I'm doing is just mucking around with chords. And what happens with me is one of the sounds that comes out will usually remind me of something. It'll kind of remind me of a song that I know. I might not be able to think of the name of the song. That's pretty normal. But, you know, it's like that might inspire me to sort of search for another note that I can use, you know, or somewhere I can move the chord to get the sound I want. Now, one last example. Joe Satriani, one of my favourite guitar players, he did like a thing where he sort of moved a chord shape, and it was a really basic chord. That was it. It wasn't even a full open chord. It was just kind of, it was almost like part of an A shape. You know, it's like I say, if you don't play the note, if you don't use a finger on the B string, then you just got those two fingers on the middle strings. And that's kind of what he was doing on Not of This Earth. It's the title track from his first proper album that he did, the one that came out before Surfing with the Alien. And it just starts off it's like, it doesn't get any more simple, you know, and you always imagine that everything Joe Satriani plays has got to be really complicated because it's Joe Satriani. But what could be easier than that, you know? I mean, from a beginner's point of view, you just got to make sure that your fingers are curled round enough so that they don't lean across the other strings. You know, that's pretty standard, but... you know, it's like there's dodgy places you can play that, but there's good places as well, you know, so. So that's my top tip for this week. Experiment, you know, try things out. It doesn't have to be something that you've learned, or it hasn't got to be a song that you know. You can just pick up your guitar and just, you know, start off with something you're familiar with, but then just change it a little bit, you know, and just see what it sounds like. That's how you might end up discovering something that nobody's ever played, you know. So it's, you know, it's worth trying. And at the end of the day, you're creating stuff yourself then. So you're not just playing stuff that either you've been taught or you've picked up from a video, or you've or it's a song that you know, a song that you know. So you haven't got to try any of these exact examples that I've shown you. You can just try and think of some other ones, you know. But anyway, as always, I'll leave it there, and thanks for watching, and I hope you can catch me next time. Cheers.